everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Liquid Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Karl, and with us always is Taylor Page. And today we're very excited because we have two special guests from the Shopify Performance team with us today, Michael Gooding and Kimberly Oleiro. Michael, Kimberly, welcome to the show. Do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Thank you. So I'm Kimberly. I'm a senior product manager here at Shopify. I work on the storefront's product, most recently shipping an update to our web performance dashboards.
Nice.
And my name's Michael Gooding. I head up our growth services, professional services team. We work directly with merchants to help them grow their businesses on Shopify.
Excellent. And we appreciate you guys joining us. We know we've been trying to do this for a few weeks now, but you've been kind of busy over there at Shopify, working on something editions. So how's your life been recently? You've been pretty packed?
I mean, this week has been a lot less packed now that Editions is out in the world, but leading up to it, certainly been quite busy. Yeah.
Awesome. Michael, how about yourself? You also feeling the strain come off?
Yeah, we have a constant one, so we're continually working with merchants. But it was actually, this is the first project that I've got involved in actually shipping something for Editions. And it was great to see Kimberly and the team working and how they kind of gravitate towards that deadline and just all out. And yeah, I just got to watch from the sidelines while do my best to help them where I can.
That's nice. Well, it's kind of fun to have those seasons to product development, but it's always nice to be on the other side of the big push and bask in the calm for another week or two, right? And then I'm sure it starts all over again for you.
Yeah, definitely does.
Yep.
We're in planning phase right now, but
Oh,
it was
no.
great to see. It was great to see it well received, the new
Yeah.
performance dashboard. So we're really
Yeah,
excited
definitely.
that was the case.
Now, Taylor, we owe this serendipitous meeting all to you because you're the one that sort of found these guys and arranged it all and set it all up. Do you want to sort of introduce the main topic we're hoping to attack today?
Yeah, so we really were hoping to talk about these new performance updates. Beforehand, most folks are familiar with when you're in the online store and you kind of see the speed score. You've probably heard of it only because a merchant was complaining about it at some point or another, not really understanding the purpose of the score or anything like that, just that there is a score and there's some feedback in there. And now with this most recent update, I'm just excited about it because I do some speed optimization out in the wild working with folks. And so having met Michael before previously on Twitter when I put my foot in my mouth talking about performance, and he was very gracious and kind to me in pointing out his contributions on the Shopify's end of things. And so since then, we were able to stay in touch and thankfully was open to coming on and talking about this big change. So Michael and Kimberly, it would be great if we could talk a little bit about this big change, this Shopify web performance dashboard, where before we had this score and it kind of popped up, several years ago and those sorts of things. I don't think people actually cared about performance before then. It was just something that developers talked about. And then people did because there was this score, but there's a lot of nuance to it. And so, maybe that was part of the change and those sorts of things, but I'd really love to hear about, maybe we can talk about just in general, like what has changed, at least for those of maybe the folks that aren't working in this stuff day to day.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that one. So previously our speed score looked at the Lighthouse speed only. So it was kind of a singular focus as opposed to a broader holistic view of web performance. So using Lighthouse, you're only looking at speed. And we were seeing a lot of, it was just obscured, a little bit abstract, I would say, the way that we had calculated it. And so not only did we only look at one metric, but that metric was different from what you would see on Google's Lighthouse speed score, because to do it at scale for all Shopify merchants, that service just, it was just a little bit tough to get an accurate score, to match it to Google. And so it gave merchants more confusion, I would say, than help.
Sure.
And so we tried to move away from Lighthouse to looking at real user metrics. So Lighthouse is a synthetic metric. So just using a simulated environment of your browser and network speed and all of that, which is great for getting quick results, but it doesn't necessarily paint a picture for merchants about what their actual buyers are experiencing. And so we made a big shift to lean towards real user data, exactly what the merchants and their buyers would be experiencing, and going beyond just speed and looking at all three core web vitals, which represent not only speed, but visual stability and interaction, which again is like a holistic view of web performance.
So when you say that was a synthetic representation, did they choose just one set of criteria for how to represent sort of that typical browser session and use that to base their score? Or did they try like a low bandwidth, high bandwidth, low latency, high latency, and combine all that into the metric, or was it just best case scenario?
In the
Ooh.
previous Lighthouse.
Yeah, the previous Lighthouse.
Okay, so it was basically an aggregation. What we would do is you take a product page, a collection page, and a home page, and then we would try and be a little bit smart and weight them accordingly based on your traffic that you see across your site, and then you would end up with one single score. But obviously the problem there is like if one goes up and you think like home page typically has like 10-15% of page views, if that suddenly shot up and then it has a big impact, then no one knows where that's coming from. And I think that was one of the big things that really confused people is they'd be like, well, hang on a minute, my product page on the actual Lighthouse tool looks fine, but yours has gone up and gone down, and people just like it couldn't really comprehend it. The instructions for it were kind of buried like 3 layers deep in the interface as well. Like actually how we did it, was documented, but people would never click through that far. But I think just going back a little bit in time as well, I think Taylor, to your point, you said that it popped up about 7 years ago, whenever it was, and I think the whole purpose of that at the time was to shine a light on performance. To your point, like no one really cared, and that was why it was there. And I think in that sense, it was successful. It made people care. But I think as the industry and the metrics and the measurement tools have evolved, I feel like it was just becoming a little bit outdated, and then that's why we made the decision to move forward with a more modern approach.
Right. Well, in Core Web Vitals, even too, if we're going to go back, I mean, that's only several years old, in regards to, a lot of the other benefits that we see from search and stuff like that. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit, so I don't want to get ahead of myself or anything, but, that is to say, when the tool first came out, Lighthouse was the best, basically, tool that we had at the time, right? Does that sound accurate?
100%. And I think the other thing is that real user monitoring tools and measurements have historically been quite expensive. And until Core Web Vitals and the Google Crux report was released, there was never a free repository of real user data. You would have to go and pay a provider, and it's not a cheap service.
No.
It's quite expensive. So yeah, at the time it was there. It was, I'm going to say, free. Obviously, there was a cost of setting it up and the infrastructure to host it, but it was available, and like I say, that's why it was chosen at the time.
No, that's awesome. And so for folks that aren't as familiar too, just Lighthouse, when we keep referencing that, is just an open source tool from Google. And a lot of us know and use it now in a couple of different ways, but basically sends a bot to emulate that traffic. But it is, it's based on a lot of times like a throttled connection, probably a lower performing processor than what most devices are using and all this fun stuff. So it's not real world for a lot of what merchants are going to be seeing. So that's why those scores weren't always the best indication of how the actual shop was performing at the time. So would love to learn a little bit more. I think we've talked pretty high level between Lighthouse and those sorts of things. But, as far as, we're moving more towards like real user monitoring, right? So this reference here, as far as the primary reason behind the change, I think we've talked about this a little bit. But what really maybe kicked this off, because this tool has been around for a long time. We've talked about there have been better tools, but obviously there has to be a significant enough drive to change the existing tool, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure y'all have a lot of other competing priorities. So what kind of like ultimately pushed that over to where like this is now a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think we always knew it was important and that the Lighthouse speed score could be improved. But again, it's a prioritization game, right? So it's just like, the stars just so happen to line up at this time. I think one of the catalysts as well is that Shopify's been doing a lot on their actual storefront rendering speeds and telling that story holistically. If a merchant storefront isn't performant, then they're not going to reap the benefits of our servers being performant. And so think that was more so the catalyst of why this got prioritized now. It's like we knew that there was opportunity, but because we are investing so much in the backend infrastructure and rendering times, we really wanted to make sure that merchants could take advantage of that on the front end by feeling more in control of their storefront performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea behind a lot of this, right, is there's a lot of more context, other than just that general score, right? The initial score. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that specifically as far as like the context here of the transition that this does actually provide for some merchants. Because I do know we kind of have this rollout that's happening right now, right? And I haven't seen it in any of the shops that I'm working in, but I know like this probably takes like weeks, right, before this gets rolled out, kind of type thing. Just because of the scale. So I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that, aside from what we've been able to see in the announcement and editions, and then also in the posts that y'all have done as well, where the write-up about this.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, the write-up includes everything that we plan to ship in the upcoming weeks. So it shouldn't be too much of a surprise publicly. But yeah, we're trying to offer a lot more context and again, objective measures. So like Michael said, that calculation for our Lighthouse was quite complex, looking at product pages and collection and homepage, and then trying to, I think on mobile as well. It wasn't even looking at desktop, doing a weighted average, like very smart, but we are obscuring all of that away from the merchants. So the feedback that we received was a lot of people didn't know how it was calculated. So they didn't know how it was calculated. It was different from what the Google's free tools were showing. And it just added so much confusion. And then it didn't provide enough actionable insights to say, hey, like, where is this problem happening?
Right.
And that was the big part of it too, right? You can see that there's a problem, but if you can't take action on it, what's the point? So with these new metrics, our big principle for us was to just provide objective metrics. So we're giving you the exact same value for each core web vital that Google would, looking at a 28-day 75th percentile, just to show if you've passed or failed on each of the metrics. And then going a step further, let's say if you're trying to evaluate the scores, you see that your cumulative layout shift is performing poorly, then you can dive a little bit deeper. So we're trying to give something high level and objective, and then the opportunity to dig in deeper to understand where things went wrong. And that's when we open it up to a time series to be able to see your cumulative layout shift over time, to look at it on mobile versus desktop. Coming soon as well is to be able to see changes that you've made to your storefront. So have you installed an app that slowed down your site? Probably has. Or maybe made changes to the code or published a new theme. So we're really trying to provide just way more context, more directional cues, and either help merchants, like help them pinpoint and then either take action themselves with tons of great resources like Michael's performance blog, but also giving them the language and vocabulary to speak to a developer should they need to reach out for help.
Yeah, I think just doubling down on that, that's the key thing there, right? Is this data alone doesn't make anyone's website faster and therefore doesn't increase their conversion rates, right? It's about giving them the right information, the right context to them go and be able to do something about it. And I think that's the intent here. Kimberly, just one very small thing, which you said there, I just want to, for everyone listening, just to avoid any future confusion. While the methods of calculations are the same as what you will see from Google and Crux on the core web vitals, the data set is slightly different of what we show and they show. Okay, so there's a couple of differences here. So the Google data is only made up of Google users, or Google Chrome users, I should say, on mobile and desktop who have opted in to have their performance data shared. Our data set is probably a little bit bigger. So we also include Firefox that now supports LCP. We also include all of the web views. So if you're clicking out from a social media advert and clicking onto a web view in Chrome, then you will also get that included in our data as well. And I also think there is a slight difference that the Chrome data includes forward back navigations, and we don't, and deliberately so, because we feel like they're always fast and you don't really want to worry about those. You want to just focus in on,
you don't want the cache page or whatever that you've already visited,
like,
right? Like that's not good.
Kind of patting yourself on the back for no great reason, right? And so,
But we
and then
need that, Michael.
well,
No,
maybe
that's
in the
good.
future,
That's more real world. That's more real world. No, you're right.
maybe in the future we could expose both or something. I don't know, but like for now, we
Yeah.
decided that actually what you need to know is how it's loading properly, not like these kind of like glorified metrics. So like, oh yeah, great, it was really fast for 10% of users, but like, so yeah, they just press back on their browser, it doesn't really count, right?
Well, yeah, that's a good call out specifically, because a lot of times we're talking too, we care a lot about the users the customers we're trying to win over, right? Like those first time customers, your repeat customers, usually they're already sunk in. They're willing to wait maybe if it takes a little bit longer. Where we're talking about trying to win over conversions, it's those first time customers that's real important. So that's a really good thought, how that was implemented then.
That's exciting. I can imagine, and Kim, I think you already kind of touched on it, but early in the conversation, I was really thinking through, okay, I've seen both sides, engineering and product management. It seems like there's two challenges, what you guys have pulled off here. And the big one, obviously, is presenting it to the user in a way that makes sense from a UX standpoint. I imagine you put a lot of thought into that. Are there any call outs you want to make in terms of what people could pick up on there, things we should pay attention to, and how we can make the most of that information and the way you presented it?
Oh, yeah. So it was definitely an interesting challenge, right? Because we're working with big data sets and statistics, which is not always the easiest thing to work with from a design perspective. So there was a lot that went into the UX, and our designer, Rosina, did an amazing, amazing job. We chatted with a lot of merchants, putting ideas in front of them to see if the visualizations made sense and resonated. So I think one of the biggest challenges was to communicate the idea of the 75th percentile. So showing the best 75 views, not visits, for each metric. So if you look at the scorecards, there's like small nuances, but you can see the little arrow that indicates where the 75th percentile fits, and really just trying to communicate that you're going to have users or buyers that range through the different statuses. So you might have a score where your 75th percentile is maybe needs improvement, but that doesn't mean that all buyers are having a bad experience. So we actually show the distribution of buyer experience. So we'll show you how many of your buyers had a good experience, how many needs improvement, or how many were okay. And again, it's just more and more context to help merchants really prioritize these problems and see how big of a problem it is. Because you could be right on the cusp between good and needs improvement, and maybe then it's not that big of a deal. But if you're in the red, then you can see that you're in the red, and maybe the majority of your buyers' experiences are in the red. So that was, it looks simple now, but there was a ton of nuance that went into those scorecards.
I think extending beyond that, the technical challenge is one thing, and I think the team did a great job of like just taking all that data, processing it quickly enough, and then getting it available on screen. But I think there's also the human challenge as well, right? The one thing I love about working at Shopify is like we have a range of users and customers that range from like someone who's a bit like my mum, bless her, like who's not very computer literate, like all the way up to probably a professional data scientist looking at this data. So the big challenge I think we had, Kimberly, and we went round in circles on this quite a bit, was like how do we service both of those audiences? And I think you'll notice some like subtleties in the labeling. Like I think this came about. I went to a conference last year. It's the Performance Now conference. It's based in Amsterdam. It's like the #1 web performance conference. I say the #1 because it's probably the only one left. But it's a fantastic event, and someone did a talk. It made me laugh, and they said look, we're all performance engineers, and we all talk this language, but what kind of person invented a metric called last contentful paint? Like, what does that actually mean? Like, it's ridiculous, right? Like, it doesn't talk to anything. It means nothing. And so, like, our challenge with this interface was like, how do we take a concept like largest contentful paint, which is ridiculously named, and make it accessible and understandable to someone like my mum, who like very rarely uses a computer?
Right.
And I think we've tried to address that in there as well. Like, no doubt there'll be lots of data scientists that'll be telling us that there's more that we could have done and made it more complicated. But actually, a lot of our users aren't data scientists. Shock horror. Like they're commerce people. They want to sell things, right? They don't want to learn all these fancy phrases and things like that obviously like we care deeply about, but they don't translate well.
Right.
And those
somewhere
out there.
Oh, go ahead, Karl.
Somewhere out there in our 5 or 10 listeners, the person who invented that is listening to this right now, Michael, and he's sad. So if you are the guy that came up with our just contentful paint, we respect you, we appreciate you. Sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
No, I was just going to say, coming onto this product at the very beginning as well, and everything was just FID, CLS.
Right.
And it was just like acronym. And I was like,
Yeah.
whoa, like this is a lot to take
It's
in.
tough. Yeah, when you're talking to people and even talking to merchants, because again, like a lot of those initial reach outs, which is why I'm very excited about this tool, because this is all like so much more actionable, and it's like not there was so much education on the front end when you're trying to work with someone that's just like, I know that this speed score, like something's wrong, but like all of they have these many misgivings about it, and which is good and bad. Half the time it's just like, educating people about it and turning them down, like doing a quick check and being like, you actually don't need to worry about this. Like, honestly, you don't. Like, you're better, suited to try to invest in these other spaces. So, but like Michael was talking about, I'm just trying to like go through, and you're typing up an email, and I'm shortening everything to, the little acronyms or whatever to FID, and, just trying to like spell all that out, do a good job spelling it out and putting it in the little parentheses, so that way they know what the heck you're talking about throughout. But it makes it much more meaningful and actionable. I think just looking at this, I feel like this like provides so much more context, and fantastic. Aside from this was going to be a question, and Michael, you touched on this. I don't know if you want to talk about this a little bit more as well about the initial thought that I had when the little thing pops up in the dashboard about the score changing.
I lost Taylor.
To
anyone else?
Slightly.
There, you're back.
Oh, okay, good deal. Sorry. Well, so as far as the initial pop up in the performance dashboard with the score before, let us know, hey, like this is going to be changing to core web vitals. So a lot of folks, I think from the performance side, were thinking like, okay, how are we going to deal with newer merchants? Like, what are they going to see? But I think that's, Michael, you touched on this. Y'all had met this a little bit by Shopify is using mostly their own data, more so than just Google's opt-in traffic. So whereas, Google really won't give you, any kind of core web vitals feedback without a lot of users, but y'all are able to surface that much more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that Kimberly, you can probably talk to this as well. I think there was a little bit of backwards and forwards with our data scientists and what's statistically relevant. And so I think when you're talking about a 75th percentile and bucketing it into good, bad, and needs improvement and things, I think there is a nuance there. But I think what we've tried to do is say, look, even if you've only got 10 users, you can tell them that you had 9 of them got a good experience and 1 of them got that. That's useful information that, is really going to help a lot of our merchants. And I think there will be, and Taylor, you'll run into this probably with consultancy. I think there will be a little bit of confusion potentially,
Sure.
to begin with from merchants. But I think the message we would give them is that, just look at all of your visitors, like see where the patterns lie. And then to your point, I think you mentioned this earlier, is like, does it represent a big enough issue to spend time on? Because again, from our point of view, for every dollar or hour that someone spends having to deal with something technical in Shopify, it's an hour they're not dealing with selling something. And so our mission is really to try and just do that for them. And so, like I say, there'll be a small learning curve, but we hope that we got the balance right in choosing to kind of display it. Because to your point, like we did do the math, didn't we, Kimberly, around how many merchants would have seen data at the levels of the core web vitals, and I think there was a large population that wouldn't have seen any information at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was probably our biggest challenge, was how do we handle low data scenarios? And to reach statistical significance, we realized that not a lot of early merchants would get there. And so we really just tried to say, like, let's expose what we have. Let's collect as much as we can, expose as many views as we can. And so we actually do consolidate by default the mobile and desktop views. We provide subsequent filters. So if you want to drill down to mobile or you want to drill down to desktop, you can if you have sufficient data to do so. But again, to kind of build out that data set, we default to collecting or displaying both views. And we also show the number of views to help merchants, again, with more context, to say like, oh, my score is bad, but I've had 5 views. Maybe I should spend money on, driving traffic to my site instead of performance at this point. So really, again, just helping them paint that full picture and understand that, like, maybe this is not the time to invest in performance and maybe you should invest somewhere else.
I really appreciate that you said that, Kimberly. Even the fact that you used the term statistical significance, because I think what that communicates to us is that this wasn't just some numbers that you're, kind of massaging and making it look good. You guys actually have a lot of data science behind this to show really meaningful, actionable data. It's not just a general indication, right? And so it sounds like this is something that's really going to be a benefit. And then even taking the time to make it work on those edge cases, like the low data cases, like you mentioned just now. Oftentimes tools say, oh, there's just not enough data to help you. Sorry, that kind of thing. But it sounds like you're really working hard to even make it work for folks in that situation. And that's really cool. Thanks for taking the time to do that.
No problem. Yeah, we're hoping it helps a lot of merchants.
Maybe you will. So as far as the future of the web performance dashboard and this rollout and those sorts of things, I had noticed as well in the initial outset here, we've got references to that first input delay and those sorts of things as we are looking at an update to INP, the interaction index paint, rolling out in March. From what I saw, they're going to start gathering data already for this in February. So is there going to be, the dashboard's going to roll out, then it's going to get another update here, like after March, or what does that look like for y'all? And how annoying was that right at the same time that you were rolling this out, you were having to account for a brand new set of metrics?
Well, it would have been nice if that coincided with additions as well.
Right.
But it didn't. So yes, it's definitely on our radar.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to get that roadmapped to switch over to IMP.
Yeah. I think it was announced on the same day as additions, wasn't it? It's like great timing. But
Yeah.
we knew it was coming. We've been speaking to some folks over at Google, so like we knew it was there. A little bit of history. We've actually been collecting the data for a while, and I think with the addition of INP, we made a decision to be more efficient internally and kind of future-proof the process of collecting data. We're going to switch beacons, and I think in order to do that, that's why it didn't get done for additions. So we had a choice. I think Kimberly made the sensible choice to go with additions with what we had, and we would then come back and revisit IMP afterwards. But we'll see.
Well, makes sense because obviously, from everything I've seen here or what have you, I haven't seen it in a dashboard quite yet, but it's still an improvement regardless. Even if we're finally looking at, just core web vitals in general, it's still a massive improvement leap. So kudos to y'all for having that, and sounds like it was a good thing to have an existing relationship there with Google to be able to kind of get out in front of that too.
100%. On the improvement there, is like you say, I think I sent a note to Kimberly and the team. I think I've estimated it's going to send me, is it 10 days a year? I'd estimated that this is going to save me in explaining to people why not to focus on their speed score.
Easily.
It was like half an hour per customer, 2 customers a week. Like that was my basis, and I think I worked out that was 10 days a year just for me. And we got 2 other people in the performance team having the same conversation. So like as far as we're concerned, like that's now 10 days we can go and reinvest in something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. It's a huge bump there.
Should resonate to you as well, Taylor, right? And all of our freelance partners.
It does. Like I said, I'm doing nothing but singing y'all's praises. So you've got a good advocate in my corner here.
I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had with agency owners or other developers. It's like this merchant, we love them to death, but they're so fixated on the Lightspeed score. Like we got to help them see there's more to life than that score, and so hopefully this will do that.
And the fixation was so interesting too, because previously we had a comparison to other storefronts, which was such a controversial thing. People either loved it or hated it, but the reaction to it was so interesting because people would either have 99% or let's say 95%, but if they were lower than similar scores, they would like want that 100 more than anything. Or alternatively, they would have like 30, but because they were similar to other stores or better, they'd be like, oh, okay, I guess I'm better than them. It's fine that it's 30. So it didn't really help anyone.
Yeah, that's what I always would start off with is, it's not this, and I'm not sure if this works from an international front, but from US based merchants, it's like, it's not like a, we're thinking of 0 to 100, like, in terms of like grades in grade school, right? And so people see a 30, or even a 60 and like, this is an F or a D, and somebody's calling home to mom and I'm not going to get to play video games because I failed this test or whatever kind of thing. It's like, that's not what it means in this context. So it is nice to not have to go through that whole rigmarole. But, and this might be backtracking a little bit from what we were talking about, but I think, some of us, especially on the technical side, yes, great. Like developers have cared about performance for a very long time. And there are people who even specialize, obviously, on the performance front. But why should merchants even care? And I think, Michael's already touched on this a little bit, kind of type thing, because it's not as simple. Everyone's read this like study at some point, right, where Amazon shaved off 1/100th of a second on load times, and they saw an extra 100K a month or something, like some ridiculous stat. And so every merchant who's turning over $100 a month then thinks that their low Lighthouse score is why they're not getting sales. And so I don't know, Michael, if you want to talk about that or what have you, like why are merchants supposed to care when we're technical people? We want things to run fast. It's kind of like a little bit of a quality thing on our end that things aren't slow and we haven't written poor code. But from when you're talking to merchants, they don't necessarily care about like that. What should merchants care about performance in that regard, and why should we talk about it this much?
So there's actually a graph we always show people. So when we do work with merchants, I think the first thing we try and ask is like, do you genuinely believe that a faster website will make your business better, like increase conversions, reduce bounce rates? And if they say no, we could pull out a graph which has a correlation between, we'd normally go for LCP because it's got the best correlation, but correlation in LCP to conversion, and we tend to see anything, like you will definitely always see a peak around the sort of 1.5 to 2.5 seconds, and the 2.5 seconds is your core web vitals target, so it kind of explains why that is what it is. And then after that point you see a line going down, and it will work its way down to 0. Doesn't matter what the merchant is, what segment they're in, what they sell, I always see the line when we look at that data. Now, one thing I would say is the steepness of that line going down will depend on what they're selling. So if you're selling luxury goods where there's like not a lot of choice, the line becomes a lot more flat, and actually it doesn't go down as fast. But if you're in a commodities-based market and you're selling things where there is a lot of choice, that line is as steep as you like. So
Right.
I've never seen a merchant yet in probably the last 10 years looking at data like this that doesn't have that correlation. So if anyone doesn't believe me, come and tell me your store. I'll have a look at the data and I'll show you the line. You'd be amazed. So I think like that's the first thing, is it does matter, and the data is there to prove it. And so I think that's what I would say to anyone who didn't believe that performance is important for the business. And we also do the same with,
it matters to customers, right? Which
yeah,
ultimately
100%.
is
And we also see the same correlation in bounce rate as well, but it's the inverse. Obviously, bounce rate goes up as performance gets worse.
right. Yeah, because customers aren't interested in waiting around for things to load, or when they click on something, or if things are moving around, and all those things. And again, the benefit of Core Web Vitals focusing more on just the speed aspect, but actual experience that the user or customers and our jargon.
What's interesting to think about there too, Taylor, is I don't know in your work if you've ever come across, I'm going to call them those unicorn sites, the sites that are so bad and yet they seem to sell so well, and you think, man, if they're doing this well with this crappy of a site, imagine what you could do for them if you leveraged that data and actually got them to a better performance spot. So
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. Is like the web performance is not going to make or break you having a great product. It's not going to get you product market fit, right?
Yeah.
It's like saying that, Core Web Vitals and web performance is the silver bullet to getting ranked on SEO. But if you're not creating content and you're not optimizing your site for SEO, no matter what you do for performance, you're not going to get there. So I think there is nuance here, right? Like you do have to have a great product and you do have to have product market fit. And if you're playing the SEO game, you do need to have great content. But if there's any kind of tie-breaking scenario, web performance absolutely will make that difference, right? If a buyer has to choose between A and B and your site is faster, it's going to win. And I think with the web now, everyone's online. And maybe that's why web performance is becoming more, maybe people are caring about it more, is because there's a lot more competition. And so I think merchants do need to care because it's very, very easy for buyers to just go to another site.
Yeah. It obviously I'm heavily invested in web performance, right? It's like where I spent the last 10 years of my career. But even I am like realistic about this, and to Kimberly's point, like web performance isn't a magic bullet. It's not going to turn a failing business into an amazing business if you suddenly speed up your site. But what I always say to people is like it's about lost opportunity. If you spend all those dollars bringing someone to your site, don't make performance be the reason that they jump off, right? You spent all that time and effort in getting them there, like don't make it a bad experience. And I think that's
Yeah.
what web performance is about, is taking those users that are already there and those ones that maybe do get a little bit frustrated and keeping them engaged and not long enough to then go and hopefully purchase through your store.
Yeah, and that's a great point as far as I feel like Michael, I'm stealing this from you, so I apologize if that was, but I think that was what you touched on, and that's that idea is there's so many problems that we can't necessarily fix on a store, right? But performance is one of the ones we can. So like, yeah, absolutely, if we can focus on that, and y'all had touched a little bit here now too, Kim, on the SEO aspect of that, because yes, like content's always going to be king. This idea, product market fit, right? From Karl's example, like some of these stores are like, what the heck is going on here? They've got all these other things. So from your suggestion too, considerations for performance, that's also going to lend itself positively to SEO as well. Do y'all want to like touch on that kind of from a high level too? I know we don't have probably too much time to go into that. But as far as maybe how you talk to or look at that for merchants.
That one's pretty nuanced. I do want you to take that. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I mean, the SEO side of things, it's a really good point, and like just I think to Kimberly, your point earlier, right? You're not going to suddenly just march up the rankings if you get a faster site, right? You need a lot of things to be done well to get better SEO. However, like performance is a part of that, and that's one of the things. And so, if you are tying with other people, then you should make sure that again, don't let performance be the reason why someone outranks you on Google. We had an interesting case study with a customer or merchant about a year and a half ago where we, based on the previous correlations that I told you, we can sometimes accurately like predict, like if we were to improve your performance from X to Y, we estimate that you'll improve conversion by this. And if we apply it to your last 6 months of orders, we think that it will result in this revenue increase. And we had a project with a merchant where they were struggling a little bit. So their kind of LCP, or largest contentful pain, or speed, if we want to kind of go down to the proper English like description that people understand, they were up at like sort of the 4-second mark, and we got them down to about 2. And so we'd done our predictions, and we said it was going to make them an extra X million in revenue. And so we went back to them about 2 or 3 months later and said, look, how's it going? We think you're going to go up this X. And they said, actually, it's more. And so the reason it was more, because they were getting a higher conversion as we predicted, but they also got a lot more extra traffic because they had started climbing those rankings as well. And so with the addition of the extra organic traffic on top of the addition of the extra conversion rate, they actually went higher, and the higher was like a half of what we predicted. So if we told them they were going to get an extra, let's say 10 million, I'm pulling this number, they actually ended up with like 15. And so it was a really nice validating moment as well, that it's not just the raw on page performance that you're going to see improvement. Potentially you're going to get more organic traffic as well.
That's awesome.
It's like a flywheel almost. It's really cool to see that in action.
It was for them, absolutely.
Yeah. It's also one of the challenges, as a developer, is if you're working with a merchant, if you make the mistake of going down the road of, hey, we'll work on your speed and you'll see the X% increase in sales or revenue or whatever, you have to realize there's so much that's out of your hands. Whether it's something the merchant does after you've helped them get the site up to speed that really reduces the conversion rate, or whether it's SEO ranking thing or who knows what. So that's an area you really have to tread carefully. But I'm really glad that you're able to give them some good predictions there, Michael. Do you have any advice for other folks that might be in a similar spot? Like, would you say just don't go there, or is it safe to kind of give some guidance around what you might expect?
As in, like, how much improvement would you expect to see? I would say if you're thinking about those core Web Vital boundaries, and like your LCP is a good 1 second over where you should be, so coming in at like the sort of 3 point something, and you can get that down to the 2 point something, I think you will see a recognizable difference. I think when you start going to those like 0.1s of a second and 0.2s, it's not always as noticeable. And like you said earlier, with the fluctuations around conversion and all the other things that go into bringing that number out in the first place, it's a little bit harder to see. But like I say, if you're already over a second over that mark, then I think that's where we would be going back to that conversation we had earlier, which is like, actually, this is a good place to invest your time, because I think the rewards and the benefits would be there.
And how quickly do those changes to a site show up in that performance data? So if I'm a developer, I'm making changes to a merchant site to speed it up. Should I see that reflected almost immediately in the dashboard, or does it take some time for that data to be processed?
It would take time because it's all the real user visits, right? So once the change has been made and published, it would have to take any new traffic coming in, and then that's going to be not averaged, but it's going to take the 75th percentile over the 28 days.
Sure.
So it will take a while to see the full new data set, I would say.
So it's a bit of a lagging indicator. You have to anticipate that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's less than 24 hours though, Kimberly, right?
To collect it, yes, but to actually see significant change on the number, because we're looking at the 28-day bucket,
Yeah.
I would
so I
say
think,
it would take a little bit to change it.
yeah, so I think data comes through and it's processed relatively quicker. I don't want to put words out there because I'm not sure exactly on the. I know what it is for the back end and our reports we use, but I don't know what we've done on the front end. But yeah, so there is a slight time delay in getting it back. What I would say though, in terms of changes in user behavior, there's two schools of thoughts on this. The first one is instantaneous, and we've seen this. We had one merchant, it's a great story for this podcast, super focused on speed score. We tried our best to educate them otherwise. They went ahead with an engagement with us, and we thought they'd agreed with us that it was all about the real user data. We improved them dramatically. Their conversion rate went up by from about 2% to 4% overnight. The same day they implemented the changes we gave them, and then they weren't happy because their speed score didn't improve by the same amount. And so I was like, yeah, but your conversion rate went up. And they were like,
It's
yeah, but
not a
you didn't change the
90,
speed score.
so.
I was like, we literally doubled their conversion. But that was instantaneous. But I have seen a friend of mine used to work as a performance engineer at Trivago. He did a study once about the idea of muscle memory, and that sometimes it takes time for people to come back and revisit your site, because if they've been today and they were put off because it was slow and laggy, like maybe they don't come back again for a week or 2 weeks and things like that. And so to get that kind of traffic to then change their minds, because they're the users that are going to make your conversion increase, right? Because you'll have a group of loyal customers that are probably visiting your site every day. They'll buy your products because they're great and they don't care that the performance is slow. But it's those kind of swaying, easily led kind of customers that are the ones that you really want to sway and influence them to say, look, this is a great buying experience. And so that can take time. They don't come back every day because they were there last week and it was slow. So maybe they'll come back in 2 or 3 weeks. And so there's this second school of thought that you get this kind of longer point in time and benefit as well. So you should never just look at the first week after making a change and go, oh well, it didn't change. Give it a bit of time, because you hopefully will see those improvements.
Actually, just adding to that, I'm thinking of the scorecards and the numbers not shifting as quickly. But if you look at the second page where it's the time series, we do show different breakdowns like daily, weekly, monthly. So with that daily view, you should be able to see the numbers trending up or down.
Gotcha. So if you're actively working on performing a store's performance, increasing a store's performance, you can get some quick feedback by looking at that second drill down. That's what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
100%. I'm not going to throw it out there, but it's going to be at least 24 hours. It might be lower, but that's the other advantage over the Core Web Vital reports as well, right? Is that they give you a rolling 28-day window or a full month's worth of data, which you then have to wait a couple of weeks for as well. So if you're making changes, it's really hard to see, did that make a difference? Whereas obviously our data will let you see that straight away within the time frame of us processing that data.
So I have another question for Kimberly, unless you have one queued up, Taylor.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So Kimberly, being on the product side of things, what are some things you really want users of this tool, both merchants, but more developers, because it's primarily our audience, to understand and to appreciate about what they can do and utilize through this beautiful interface you put together?
Ooh. So I think it hasn't shipped yet, but we're planning to ship it soon, is the breakdown of events. So like I said before, being able to see app installs, code changes, theme published events, I think that's going to be really meaningful. We are also exposing an API. So that right now it's in an unstable version, but I think for anyone that's particularly interested in web performance metrics and want to kind of create their own visualizations, we are exposing the aggregated data as well for any kind of passionate developers.
So what are some of the use cases you've envisioned for that?
So So that one we're still, I mean, Michael might be more equipped to answer this one because he's actually built custom visualizations.
As in, what can people start doing with the data if they pull the raw data?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Ooh, what would I do with the data if I had a chance? So I think as things stand today, I think there's probably a couple of things that maybe you'd want to wait for first. But do you know, I hadn't really thought about it. Come
sorry.
back to me.
Sure, no worries. I wasn't sure if you had a particular thing in mind, like you thought, oh, maybe there's a market for apps to augment the performance dashboard by taking that data and doing other things with it, or maybe it was more for developers to get a deeper peek into what's going on behind the hood.
I
Or
mean, the one thing you could do is you could start overlaying your conversion rate data onto your performance data. You could take a feed from both and start putting them on top of each other. That would be an interesting one to look at. Don't think you'd be able to get bounce rate today, but yeah, I think that would be one place you could start, but it's then where could you kind of mix and match? But I think in terms of the data we've got available today and we're publishing, I think we've got all those graphs kind of covered in what you'd want to do. You've got the distribution, you've got the 75th percentile. I guess you might want to go back further because I think we only go back, how many
90
days? 90 days. So again, you could just pull them and put them into your own repository for now. And if you wanted to then do a full year or whatever, you could build that up over time as well. So I guess that would be what I would be potentially looking at it at the moment. But I'm sure there'll be some wonderful ideas and people coming up with things that we never even thought about.
Yeah, and that was kind of the idea too. So we've definitely talked about the idea of app extensibility, potentially the conversion, being able to correlate these performance metrics to business metrics is definitely important. But just the idea of putting it out there to the community and seeing what all these brilliant creative developers come up with, right? It's like just having that conversation is now open, right? And we're really excited to see what comes out of it. If it's feedback, it's frustrations, people try things, that's the type of information that we look for that will guide the product roadmap. So this is kind of that first step.
That's awesome. And that speaks a lot to you guys as a team too, that you would be willing to put the extra effort into an API without necessarily even having a specific gain from it, but knowing the developers are going to appreciate that and do some cool stuff with it. So it's exciting. Now, Taylor, I know you're coming up pretty quick on your hard stop. Do you have anything else you want to ask or pass along?
No, I think we wanted to just touch real quick. I know we had a couple of listener submitted questions, so we probably want to hit those quick, and then we'll end obviously with making sure that we cover any other like resources and things that the team needs to get out there. But one question, I know we've talked about a lot of these kind of specifically here, but as far as the speed score submitted from Ed Laver on Twitter, going to start measuring and reporting RUM, which we've talked quite a bit about, and we've referenced there being a problem with lots of bad actors gaming the Lighthouse scores for their speed optimization apps, wreaking havoc on merchant sites, even folks that I've worked with in the past that have been hit with these folks where they hired them to get a speed score, which is the problem kind of that was birthed out of that, people complaining some of those instances, like they just wanted to see the speed score go up. It's like, okay, well, I can make that happen real quick with a little bit of JavaScript just to say, hey, if it's the Lighthouse bot, don't load in all this extra stuff, and that doesn't help your users, but it sure helps the score. So, I obviously at this point we know that the tool has come out, but is there anything specific that you want to say about that, kind of like that motivation there?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that was one of the other reasons. So to answer the question, yes, first of all, this is RUM based. We've covered that, but just in case there was any doubt. Second one around the bad actors. I mean, listen, the bad actors and the market and the industry that exists with this is one that we don't necessarily agree with. And I think it's against our terms of service for any partner to build an app that misleads our merchants. So one thing I will say, it's a game of cat and mouse, right? So this has made it a little bit harder to now start gaming those metrics that we're interested in with publishing. But let's be honest, it can still be done. And there are apps out there that do it. We're currently in the process of, I think, of reviewing about 63 apps and potentially trying to shut them down because they're already gaming the RUM metrics, not just the Lighthouse ones. But to your point, Taylor, the Lighthouse one was like super easy to do. You just look for the user agent string, you say it's a Lighthouse, you do something completely different. But the RUM ones, are even more nuanced. And it's a like I say, it's a game of cat and mouse. So originally, the biggest hack that everyone came up with when we had LCP, which measures the largest image or content on the page, the obvious hack that people started doing there was they were laying a transparent SVG of 9,000 pixels by 9,000 pixels over the top of the page, and they would load that straight away. So the user sees nothing, but the browser says, "Oh, okay, this is a really big image. It's loaded after 1 second. Let's stop the timer here." Chrome then introduced a check where they look at the entropy of the image. So they'll actually look at how much color there is and how much substance there is to the image. But we've already started to see people now working around that. So what we're seeing people doing is putting because you can also get a text area, so a white text on a white background full of just a lorem ipsum, like as a background to then bring that up. So it is a complete game of cat and mouse. It's completely pointless in terms of if you're doing it and you think you're doing a good thing as a merchant. But however, it also creates a market for these kind of, what I would say, bad actors to not prey on our merchants, but really take advantage of them and, tell them they're doing one thing, but they're clearly not. So expect a blog post on this one soon. I think Mateus and my team is currently looking at this. We're just kind of working out what our approach should be around how do we work with those merchants and those apps as well that are doing those types of things.
Awesome. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about that. So last real quick question from Chris on Twitter asked about what Shopify is doing to help combat mobile performance scores. So there's always this disparity, right, between desktop and mobile. And so I've got a standard thing that I usually communicate to merchants. But as far as from y'all's perspective, what is some of the shift of making sure, since most traffic is mobile, what's Shopify doing about it, or what's kind of the general reasoning behind that as well?
Do you want me to take this one, Kimberly?
Please.
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, what we tend to see is mobile performance is generally worse. But the one misconception I would say we have is that it's about the connection or the bandwidth, but it's not really anymore. Like with 4 and 5G connections, you can often find that you get a better connection on your phone than you do your home Wi-Fi. It's actually the processing power of the device itself and the JavaScript. So the more JavaScript you add to the page, the harder it is for that device, because as good as our mobile phones are today, they are not as big, as powerful as our laptops and desktop PCs. Right. So it really lends itself, I think, there to being a little bit more conscious around what you're doing with the JavaScript. And I think the introduction of INP is going to be so important here, because I think now we're going to have a measure that genuinely addresses how much JavaScript on the page you have, and how well written that JavaScript is, and how much it is kind of hogging the thread of the browser and carrying out those tasks. So I think that's going to shine a light. The next big question is, what do we do about it? I think, Taylor, you mentioned you find it quite hard to debug that. And I think that's where we're going to try and get our head around how do we surface attribution as an industry, not just us at Shopify, but how do we solve these problems and say, yes, this measure is bad and these are the root causes, go and fix these. And I think that's going to be key. And then I think the second part, which is super exciting for us as a performance team, is we can then go and work with those third parties, right? No third party comes to the table and they want to be slow. And so we've had a few already where we've noticed that they are the cause of the IMP issues. We reach out to them, we tell them what's wrong, and they are super receptive to receiving that feedback and any help they can get. So I think this year is going to be an important year for anyone working in WebPerf to try and work with those third parties, try and get their JavaScript written in a way that isn't kind of detrimental to performance. So I think once we get that, and IMP will help, I think we should start being in a better place for mobile performance, kind of catching up or getting back to where it should be against desktops.
Awesome.
Well, as we kind of wrap things up, Taylor, if you got a bounce, go for it, or stick around, whatever you need to do. But if merchants or developers have feedback they want to leave for you guys about the new performance dashboard, how do they do that? What's the best way to get in touch with your team?
Probably to start the Shopify partner channel. The developers are reaching out. And from a merchant perspective, I would say reaching out to support on our Shopify help docs. Yeah.
And when you say Shopify partner channel, you're talking about the Slack?
Yes. Sorry, the Slack.
There's some debate about whether you guys prefer the Slack or the Discord, so I always bring it up.
Slack is popping up more.
Yeah, I prefer the Slack
Down
myself.
With the Discord.
I prefer the Slack, 100%. Yeah. But I was going to say as well, I'm kind of hovering around constantly on social media channels as well. So if anyone had something burning to get off their chest and they wanted to talk about it, I'm kind of open to have those conversations as well. So
good. And the other big thing is that it's still rolling out, right? By the time our listeners get this information, it'll still be February. And if it's available, how do they access it? And if it's not available, how will they know when they get it?
Ooh, so the best place to access it is from your online store, your themes, where you see the list of your themes. So right up top where the speed score used to be, you'll now see the 3 core web vitals. So that'll be one entry point into the dashboard. Another one is looking through your reports analytics and looking for the web performance speed score.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how quickly do you anticipate this being available to all merchants?
We're looking for 100% rollout by end of month.
Okay, great. So it shouldn't be much longer.
Not much longer.
It's amazing. What a feat you guys have pulled off. And Taylor had to drop, and I've got tons of questions about the engineering side of things, but I think we've reached a good point here. Is there anything else you guys want to pass along to our developers that are listening?
Well, just as you mentioned, the engineering that went into this.
Yes.
So we talked about UX, we talked about all our data scientists, but the engineers that put all their hard work into this project from back end to front end, creating the APIs, etc. It was a lot of work and a lot of collaboration internally. So I just want to say a huge shout out to the team.
Yeah, if you are listening, Shopify engineers lurking out there, we really do appreciate you, and I can understand how much work this must have been. How long was the project, if you don't mind me asking?
About 5 months.
5 months. Oh. And how many engineers do you think were on it?
Ooh.
If you had to guess.
Yeah, like 6 probably,
6? Okay.
with support from Michael's team and a lot of collaboration and from other teams. Yeah.
So that's 2.5 years of manpower to pull this out for us. So it just saved Michael 10 days of working calls.
Exactly.
I'm very demanding, yeah.
Original requirement, save Michael time.
That's right.
Well, I think it's also a shout out here. So this we have a internal Hack Days week where you have an innovation project and things like that. And actually, this was born out of a project mainly led by Sia and my team about a year ago. So this was kind of promoted back then it got resourced. Then we kind of hooked up with Kimberly and her team, and then, like I say, from there it's been full steam ahead, and here we are. So it's been a good journey.
It's amazing. Well, thank you both very much. This has been a really interesting conversation, very informative, and I personally can't wait to interact with the new performance dashboard. And we'll find you guys on social and the performance blog, and look forward to seeing more improvements as the roadmap continues. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Have a good day. Bye.